welcome to Are We Winning Yet? Edition 24, April. The last time we spoke was around the 12th, and at that point I had made a prediction about hospitalizations in the New York City area, as well as a prediction on mortality. It was a model that was based on the 9th of April, and one thing I wanted to do is actually see if that model played out. What I hate is when you keep on changing the model to know and can't tell whether that model was actually good at the time. So today what we're going to do is going to take a look at about the last 10 days of data and see how that model shook out relative to hospitalizations and mortality in the New York area. And then we can also touch on a couple of topics before we wrap up tonight. So here is the chart. In dark blue is the actual mortality. The dotted line is the actual predicted. And the predictive model was actually established on 9 April, last modified on the 12th. And it shows that even though we were a little bit under, I think it's a little bit expected, but it shows to be within about 5% of the actual value. What is interesting is that I predicted an overall mortality based on a hospitalization rate of like 900 last week and 600 for this week. And they've not been able to stay under that. We were about 4,000 higher than that total in that period. So of course mortality go up. This right here is an example of the date and how the reporting. So even though you're reporting on the 12th, they're really not reporting on the 24th. They're reporting backwards data, almost 2 weeks old in some cases. Again, it's rather suspect, and that's one of the reasons why I say my model lags, because I basically show all those people as being in the hospital that day. So if you actually use that more detailed data, it's actually within 10 or 20 deaths. So I think that's pretty accurate and should look good going forward. So I also wanted to touch on a couple of things just before we sign off. Two in particular. One is the issue that I talk about, the blame game, and it was manifested when Trump and Cuomo were in this kind of pissing argument about ventilators, and how Cuomo a couple of years ago could have bought a bunch of ventilators and he didn't, and Trump was saying he should have. Here's my point, is that this is something that in my mind I don't think there should have been any expectation that we would have been planning for it. Here's an example. We're looking for a house. We want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, a certain size lot at a certain price range, and then we get ready to go buy that house. But somebody then comes to you and say, look, you need a house that has 200 bedrooms, 300 bathrooms, because every once in 100 years there's going to be a pandemic and you may have your entire family need to stay with you. The fundamental thing is it's not going to work. There's no way that those 50 hospitals in the New York greater area would ever have been able to sustain, buy, purchase that kind of stuff. They're exactly sized to support their current configuration. So let's get beyond that. Is that it's something that this is like a tsunami. I mean, the tsunami basically just crashed through your front window, tore through your backyard, ripped up the entire town, went up the valley, and washed back out before you even knew what the hell hit you. So let's get on with that. At this point, all we should be doing is that, one, taking a look at our capacity to give as good of medical care as we can to the people in those areas. And at that point, that's all we can really do, because we don't have the ability to turn on anything else. Case in point, by the time we even got up to New York City, there was no need for those extra supplies. So even though politically it was not the right thing to do, or politically it was the right thing to do, but in reality it was a waste of time, a waste of effort, because by the time we got there, the tsunami had already gone back out to sea. So there's that. Second point I want to talk about is what I believe is an anomaly around the New York City area. I mean, my model is predicting, say, 12 to 13,000 in the greater New York area. It doesn't include New Jersey and Connecticut in that particular area. So it's going to be like one in four of the United States that dies is in that particular area. there's something there that we haven't been able to quite get our hands around. And all I can tell you is that even now, when you take a look at the data is incredibly suspect. Even now, we're getting hospital cases that are 2 weeks old, and we're not talking about ones or twos, we're talking about hundreds. So I think over the next few months, as we look into that New York City area, I think we're going to find that that is not typical. It's very atypical of everywhere else. I would have expected New Orleans or Chicago or something to be very similar, but we can see it in the data. It's just a step change difference. So that's it. I think this is a good wrap up from a standpoint of did the model work, and I think quite frankly the model did in fact work. It looks like that it's a very predictive depending on hospitalizations. We're looking at about a 7-day morbidity and a 30% lethality. And that has held true, at least in the New York City area, pretty much to the date. So if there's anything else you want to talk about, anything else you want me to address and take a look at, I'd be more than happy. Put some comments below. Look forward to catching up again. Take care.